Rafael Caro Quintero walked out of a Mexican prison 28 winters into a 40-year sentence. He served a mere fraction of the time ordered for the brutal execution of an American federal agent, and that single reality should ignite your fury. Think about that. How does an individual convicted of coordinating the slaughter of a narcotics investigator simply stroll through the exit gates? This does not represent some simple procedural mistake. This reveals how a peasant cultivator from Badiraguado engineered one of the earliest multinational smuggling networks in Latin America, ordered the execution of a key investigator, and triggered a multi-decade financial manhunt. Some call him a ghost. Others label him the pioneer of modern trafficking. Both claims hold truth. Why did his freedom command one of the highest bounties on earth decades after his original arrest? Keep listening, because by the end of this, the financial motives of this hunt will become entirely clear. Neither should you ignore the institutional failures that let him slip away. Let us look back at the twilight of the 1970s. The Mexican contraband trade existed as a fractured, localized network of independent operators. Then, three figures consolidated the entire operation. Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo provided the high-level political leverage. Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo provided veteran operational oversight and senior leadership. And Rafael Caro Quintero acted as the master of cultivation. Together, they established the Guadalajara Cartel, the premier organization to unify smuggling corridors under a single, strictly disciplined leadership structure. They operated with direct protection from corrupt elements within the Federal Security Directorate, turning local police forces into virtual security guards for their convoys. The young agrarian innovator did more than take orders. He directed the financial engine. He recognized that high-yield agricultural techniques applied to illicit crops yielded higher profit margins than traditional smuggling methods. By the dawn of the 1980s, his organization dominated shipping corridors stretching from Sinaloa to the northern border. This operated not as a street-level gang, but as a corporate entity. They utilized systematic graft and balance sheets rather than relying solely on brute force. It succeeded with terrifying efficiency for several seasons. Nobody in Washington anticipated the scale of their operations. How did a rural grower secure such absolute immunity for so long? Subscribe immediately, because tracking the movement of his hidden wealth reveals the true depth of the corruption. Here is the exact scale of the cultivation. In November 1984, Mexican infantry units, executing intelligence gathered by the American Drug Enforcement Administration, descended upon a vast agricultural compound known as Rancho Búfalo, deep in the desert of Chihuahua. What they uncovered shocked the intelligence community. Up to 2,500 cultivated acres. Irrigation systems fed by deep agricultural wells. Dedicated barracks housing hundreds of field workers. The financial value of the seized crop reached an estimated $8 billion. $8 billion. Produced across a vast network of agricultural installations. That single enforcement operation dismantled a large portion of the syndicate's seasonal revenue, and the leader knew exactly who had compromised the location. An undercover investigator operating in the heart of Guadalajara named Enrique Camarena, known to his colleagues simply as Kiki. Camarena spent months blending into the syndicate's operations, funneling valuable intelligence northward. He did not realize it at the time, but that single agricultural raid transformed him into the primary target of the most powerful network in Mexico. The leadership never forgave losses of that magnitude. February 7th, 1985. Camarena stepped out of the American consulate in Guadalajara, intending to join his wife for a midday meal. He never arrived. Armed operatives abducted him from the street in broad daylight, feet away from onlookers who remained silent out of pure terror. For weeks, Washington remained entirely in the dark. Then, on March 5th, search teams discovered his remains, alongside those of his pilot, Alfredo Zavala, discarded near an isolated estate in Michoacán. The forensic details proved the horrific nature of his final hours. Declassified government dossiers confirmed the presence of Caro Quintero at the interrogation site. He authorized the violence. When the news reached the offices of the Narcotics Agency, the institutional response transformed instantly. The era of diplomatic caution dissolved forever. Relations between the neighboring nations turned instantly personal. Investigators later recovered audio tapes of the interrogation. These recordings captured the voice of the agent pleading as his captors demanded information about the extent of the American intelligence network. The existence of these tapes shocked Washington. It demonstrated that the syndicate did not fear the United States government. They were operating with total, state-backed impunity. The agent's death ignited a relentless pursuit that continues to this day. Agents initiated Operation Leyenda, launching a dedicated murder investigation designed to corner every individual involved in the conspiracy. For the primary architect, no sanctuary remained safe. Within days of the discovery, he boarded a private flight, escaping directly into Costa Rica with a false passport and millions in physical cash. His wealth could not buy absolute protection. Costa Rican authorities, responding to immense pressure from Washington, raided his luxury estate in April 1985, taking him into custody alongside a circle of armed guards. Think about that for a moment. An individual who directed a multi-billion-dollar enterprise could not secure passage past a regional security checkpoint. Extradited back to Mexican soil, he faced a legal process that captured the attention of the international media. In 1989, a Mexican magistrate handed down a conviction for his involvement in the abduction and murder of Camarena and Zavala, alongside separate smuggling charges. The court ordered a 40-year prison term. For a brief moment, it appeared that justice, however sluggish, had prevailed. Rival syndicates observed the outcome with caution. The pioneer had constructed an infrastructure that survived major agricultural losses, international manhunts, and foreign arrests. Yet, his empire seemingly crumbled inside a federal courtroom. Or so the public believed. Legal maneuvers would later upend the entire case through the cartel's hidden financial networks. Behind the high walls of the Altiplano facility, the Godfather did not lose his authority. Intelligence reports detailed a pattern of continued influence. He received regular visits from legal representatives and business associates, maintaining control over key transit paths. Prisons during this period operated under a system of compromise. High-net-worth inmates purchased exceptional privileges, secure communications, and physical safety. In some cases, whole cell blocks were converted into executive suites, complete with catered meals and private communication lines to coordinate offshore operations. While investigators debated his day-to-day operational control, his wealth remained entirely intact. His vast portfolio, comprising real estate developments, agricultural holdings, and financial networks, remained shielded by complex legal structures. This represents the hidden battleground of the narcotics conflict. Removing a high-profile figure yields nothing if his liquid capital remains active. His assets migrated silently across international accounts, year after year, unaffected by his physical confinement. If this systematic corruption frustrates you, hit the like button. It helps expose the hidden mechanics of how these organizations survive behind bars. August 9th, 2013. A federal tribunal in Guadalajara issued a shocking ruling, overturning the conviction on a jurisdictional technicality. The judges argued that because the victim was not officially registered as a foreign diplomat, the trial should have occurred in a state court rather than a federal tribunal. The gates opened around 1 o'clock in the morning. He walked out of the facility, leaving 12 years of his original sentence unserved. The American government learned of the release from public news broadcasts rather than official channels. The reaction in Washington was immediate fury. The Department of Justice labeled the decision deeply troubling. The narcotics agency viewed it as a direct insult to their fallen colleague. While Mexican officials scrambled to issue a new warrant for his arrest, the aging kingpin had already vanished into the rugged terrain of the Sierra Madre, returning to the isolated valleys of his youth. 3 decades of investigative labor dissolved in a single midnight ruling. That does not represent a slow failure of the legal apparatus. That is a complete collapse of accountability. For nearly a decade, the fugitive operated in the shadows. Security analysts believed he continued to oversee regional operations, albeit on a more modest scale compared to his mid-1980s heyday. He consolidated power within the Golden Triangle, a mountainous border zone between Sinaloa, Chihuahua, and Durango. The geography remains so hostile that security forces rarely enter without heavy armored support. The fugitive even granted interviews to journalists, claiming he was merely a retired farmer who wished to live out his remaining winters in peace. Federal investigators rejected those claims entirely. You should too. An individual does not hide in fortified mountain encampments out of a desire for retirement. He retreats there to defend a functioning enterprise. The response from Washington took the form of financial pressure. The FBI added him to their 10 most wanted fugitives list, while the State Department authorized an unprecedented reward of $20 million for information leading to his apprehension. This represented the largest active bounty ever placed on a drug-related target. Think about the size of that figure. It demonstrates that the commitment to this pursuit remained absolute, surviving political shifts and decades of administrative turnover. Certain institutional debts are never forgotten. July 15th, 2022. Mexican Special Forces launched a coordinated helicopter raid on a remote compound near the village of Chua, deep in the Sinaloa mountains. This time, his luck expired. Armed with precise intelligence, the elite units located the target hiding in thick brush, guided to his position by a specially trained military search canine named Max. They took him into custody without a single shot fired. Sadly, the operation ended in tragedy when a military helicopter crashed during the extraction, claiming the lives of 14 service members. The arrest occurred 9 years after his sudden release, and 37 years after the abduction of Camarena. Mexican authorities proclaimed it an extraordinary success. American officials characterized it as a long-delayed act of justice. The notorious figure was once again behind bars. While Washington moved quickly to request extradition, the process in Mexico was stalled for years by court-ordered legal injunctions. Mexican authorities placed him in a maximum security prison while both nations initiated extradition proceedings. For the personnel of the DEA, this closed a file that had defined the agency's history for 2 generations. Yet, even as legal battles over his extradition continued, the core question remained for financial investigators. What happened to the wealth? Decades of illicit operations produced an immense fortune that was never fully recovered. This is where the quiet war continues, far from the cameras. Financial intelligence units spend years mapping out shell companies, agricultural fronts, and commercial real estate properties in cities like Guadalajara. They trace deeds registered to distant relatives and hidden entities designed to obscure the source of the capital. How do you dismantle an accumulation of assets that has been integrated into the legitimate economy for 40 years? Each seizure of an office building or a retail plaza disrupts the organization, but the core network often survives. The wealth is distributed, insulated, and converted into legitimate enterprises that support future generations of the syndicate's leadership. Here's the most troubling aspect of this entire history. The original cartel disintegrated when the founders were arrested, splintering into separate organizations. It evolved. After his original arrest, the remaining leaders divided the territory, establishing independent networks that would eventually grow into the modern cartels dominating the current trade. The business did not end. It merely modernized. Rafael Caro Quintero remains in a high-security cell today, but the billions he helped generate continue to circulate through the global financial system. The arrest of the individual makes the news, but the fortune simply goes quiet. If you want to understand the true mechanics of how these organizations operate, like and subscribe, because the reality of this conflict is far more complex than the headlines suggest.